my story comes from a very interesting source. It comes from the Insurance Journal, right? Not typically something that we would present here on at 9 Journal. The Insurance Journal is a weekly publication for the insurance industry. So only when it touches on cannabis will we cover it here. So the title of the article is "Claim on Seized Hemp Shipment Barred Showing Trickiness of Coverage." So it's relating to the insurance aspect of covering cannabis transport. International treaties preempt state-based legal actions, giving an air transport company an escape from claims on what a hemp producer said was botched paperwork for an overseas hemp shipment, a federal court appeals had said. The ruling from the U.S. 4th District Circuit Court of Appeals last week highlights the trickiness of running and insuring cannabis and hemp-related businesses, even as the industry continues to grow around the world. This is why people are nervous about hemp, because there's a lot of variability and a fair amount of risk, said Eric Schultz, an underwriter for the cannabis insurance company GenCap, a wholesale brokerage. There's a lack of controls, lack of regulations, and a real lack of consistency when it comes to this. And that all comes on the nastiness of what a business that doesn't have a lot of controls over how they're being regulated. The appellate judges upheld a lower federal court's ruling that a Montreal Convention of 1999 precludes a lawsuit by a Portland hemp company, which claimed that the air carrier actions resulted in the seizure and destruction of hemp product by federal authorities in 2020. Our rulings must be guided by the Montreal Convention, which, under the Constitution, is part of supreme law of the land, Judge Robert King wrote in a 3-judge appeals court panel. The court documents do not indicate if the producer or air transport company were covered by insurance policies, and the lawyers for both sides could not be reached for comment. But Schultz and other insurance experts says it's likely that any policies that contain inclusions or exclusions that barred coverage for federally illegal or high THC hemp products, and a coverage could, for international shipments of hemp, even be fully legal, hard to come by anyway. There is not a robust international coverage for hemp, where there should be a number of operations that are multinational, Schultz said. The legal action began 4 years ago when a Portland-based company called We CBD, I've never heard of them, but maybe others have, We CBD, a producer and distributor of legal hemp products, contracted with Planet 9, a charter flight and cargo carrier, to transport 3,300 pounds of hemp to Switzerland. The transport cost topped $147,000, and the value of the product could be as much as $1.3 million, according to a news report by the Charlotte Observer. By the way, that comes to about $330 a pound, so these numbers are pretty realistic. When the plane made a refueling stop in Charlotte, North Carolina, U.S. Customs authorities seized 93 bags and later destroyed the contents. Testing showed that much of the hemp was above the 0.3% tetrahydrocannabinol content allowed by law, and the court explained, while many U.S. states have legalized some form of higher THC marijuana, federal law still prohibits it, and countries having different regulations on THC levels in hemp also prohibit it. So We CBD argued then that Planet 9 had failed to provide the proper paperwork to the aviation authorities, paperwork that would have indicated that the cargo on board was legal hemp. Planet 9's website shows that it flies a number of aircraft, none with larger than 50 15-passenger Gulfstream, or what's called the G650. When local law enforcement officers in Portland saw the bags being loaded onto the plane after some seats were removed, they became suspicious and alerted custom agents in Charlotte, where the plane had stopped. At the airport, custom officials told or asked if they could see the cargo, which was in duffel bags and trash bags. Okay, probably not the way to send 3,300 pounds of hemp to Switzerland in duffel bags and trash bags. Okay, through the window of the airplane, so they could see this through the window of the airplane. So obviously this was just gonna not work out well. This seemed odd because the flight's paperwork did not mention any cargo being transported whatsoever. The court explained, and agents moved in, removed the bags from the plane. We CBD, the company that sent the material, filed suit in North Carolina against Planet 9 seeking compensation for lost cargo. Planet 9, a Van Nuys, California-based company, asked the court to dismiss the case, arguing that the Montreal Convention takes precedence. At convention, the appellate judge explained, essentially replaced the Warsaw Convention of 1929. It holds that air carriers flying international routes are liable for damage to cargo and baggage that is sustained during carriage in air. Claims must be made pursuant to the treaty. But the convention also gives air carriers an escape clause, the court noted. If the air company can show that the destruction or loss of, or damage to the cargo resulted from an act of a public authority carried out in connection with entry, exit, or transit of the cargo. The destroying of the hemp by custom agents is considered an act of public authority, the court said. We CBD, represented by, you're going to love this, attorney William Terpening. Terpening spelled P-E-R-P-E-N-I-N-G. William Terpening. The guy's like got terpene in his last name. How cool is that? Of Charlotte had also argued that the convention did not apply because the paperwork was left out before the flight was underway and the destruction of the hemp came later, meaning that those actions fell outside the scope of carriage of air. But the appeals court said that the argument was splitting hairs. Court rulings have long eschewed segmenting the precise event as long as it was part of the shipping or transport process. So you could already see the way that this article is written is geared towards insurance people, right? It's written by insurance people, read by insurance people. You probably didn't think the High at 9 News was going to cover this story. To rule otherwise would greatly diminish the ambit of the Montreal Convention and would concomitantly encourage artful pleading by the plaintiffs seeking to opt out of the convention's liability scheme, a result that the Supreme Court has counseled us to avoid, Judge King wrote in the Fourth Circuit Court opinion. Further, the court said, even assuming Planet 9 had no obligations to submit to the U.S. Customs documentation and improperly did so, the cargo could have not been destroyed unless it was in international carriage by air. So they hadn't actually left United States airspace at this time. They were still in Charlotte, which is still in the United States. The types of issues raised by this case will likely continue for years years to come, thanks to the variation between federal, state, and international laws. Even when the hemp is found to be below in the United States 0.3% threshold, international shipments can indeed be tricky, Schultz said. Some insurance carriers will provide coverage that allows up to 0.04% THC, but most don't. So interesting. What the insurance industry is saying is that they will cover up to 0.04. Well, 0.04 is an order of magnitude lower than the 0.3 threshold. So I don't get that at all. And the European Union requires that a THC level is less than 0.02%, but other countries may be different. Switzerland, where the hemp in the We CBD case was headed, allows up to 1% THC for hemp to be considered legal, according to news reports and cannabis attorneys. This is where a good agent broker comes in, Schultz said. You'll need to be able to overlay the regulations, the insurance contracts, and what the heck your insurance is covering. Maybe everything is inside a box and not a duffel bag or not a trash bag. So I think there could have certainly been some easy to solve countermeasures here done by We CBD. Sending weed over to Europe in trash and duffel bags is just a dumb idea. And I think that's sort of the theme of the article today. So that's what I have to say here from Puerto Rico. I'd be interested in what my other colleagues have to say about this article written in the Insurance Journal.
Man, I'm shaking my head. Like when I was in Germany, there was a lot of discussion around that think tank of how to properly transport things when we're talking about things like international commerce, right? And it seems like these guys kind of try to do it themselves a little bit. Like, vet who's doing your transport. It's worth that. And old shipper rule is, I don't care what the court said. You take the risk, you take the loss. So I think that this is an ignorant situation, and they should be ashamed of themselves, and I don't feel badly for them. You lost it because you threw it in trash bag, duffel bag, pardon me.
I feel like this story should have been entitled Trapper's Delight.
Well, just to calibrate yourself, those who are familiar with hemp farming, when you see a super sack, they're called super sacks. They're just huge sacks of hemp. Mm-hmm. That's about 300 to 350 pounds, depending on.
They're heavy.
They're. So could you imagine 10 of super sacks in a plane with windows?
I just bought my
I can't afford because we had a semi-trailer seized for a while, and we had to go through a lot of stuff. Scared the driver. He quit. I don't think he drives anymore still. So it's unfortunate. You have to be really careful when you're transporting hemp because they will take your shit. They'll call it weed. They'll destroy it, and they'll put you in jail. Dr. Mark,
had this flight taken off, or this was all found while it was still on the ground in South Carolina?
So what happens? The way I understand the article is that people were tipped off in Portland, Oregon, where the shipping originated, and then they contacted customs in Charlotte, where I guess the plane maybe stopped for refueling before it was going over to Switzerland, because that's a long way, right? You figure, they're going from one East Coast the West Coast to an East Coast. Charlotte is a huge airport. Those of you who've ever connected through Charlotte knows that American Airlines, it's a hub for American Airlines, and it's a pretty busy airport. So I think that, there's probably a sizable customs enforcement squad there in Charlotte, and they were tipped off by the people in Portland who saw them loading trash bags onto first they saw them taking seats off the plane, right? That's weird.
Awesome.
Why are you taking seats out of the plane?
That's not out of the norm.
And then they're putting big lawn bags full of weed.
Yeah.
American Airlines
This is a plane, not a Sprinter van. What are you guys doing?
I love this story. This story is classic right here.
We already know American Airlines is trash regardless. So
I think the underlying theme that maybe we should focus on is the fact that there's a patchwork of regulation from country to country, from state to state.
Yeah.
That really needs harmonization. So, I guess Switzerland has always been a hotbed of cannabis research, a lot of cannabis breeding going on, a lot of hemp breeding, a lot of cannabis chemistry going on in Switzerland. So right away, they're like, hey, 1%'s fine, right? So 1%'s fine there, but 1% is not fine in the United States, right? I think in the latest farm bill, they're trying to move that limit from 0.3 up to 1%. But There's no harmonization between countries, so how can you possibly ensure a transport from one country to another when you're constantly flying through airspaces of different, thresholds for THC? So yeah, this requires harmonization throughout the world, and I don't know. I just think that, the guys at We CBD don't have a chance in recovering damages on this because
zero chance.
Right?
Absolutely zero chance of recovering anything on this, and they're probably going to get charged with something ultimately. So there may be a follow-up story to Dr. Mark on this with that.
This is like
and the other confounding problem is you could look at hemp and you could look at marijuana or weed, cannabis, the stuff that we like, and you can't really tell the difference. You need to do an HPLC analysis at a lab. So I could understand them like holding the plane, doing the test, and then coming back and say, hey, this hemp is hot, send this back to Oregon. But, I would think that the folks in Oregon who are trying to make money in the hemp business would have dumbed down that hemp down to 0.3 so it could at least make it out of the United States, for Christ's sakes.
The first time I've ever heard of
this is like states' rights on steroids, right?
We got
the first flower coming out of Oregon that was too strong. That's crazy.